says, just bring it to Brony. Just bring it.
Crush Hour was released in 2003 and developed by Pacific Coast Power & Light. For those wondering who Pacific Coast Power & Light were, they were the people behind such classics as Nuclear Strike and Road Rash on N64, MX Superfly, and the riveting Power Rangers Dino Thunder. The reason I say were is because in 2005 they were rebranded as Locomotive Games before getting shut down in 2008. From 2005 to 2008, Locomotive released 3 amazing and definitely not mediocre games, and they were Cars and Ratatouille on PSP and Destroy All Humans Big Willy Unleashed on the Wii. But I digress. I was never a huge wrestling fan, however I was and still am a die-hard fan of car combat games. I've mentioned this before, but Twisted Metal is probably my favorite video game franchise of all time. So when I saw that this was going to be a car combat game, naturally I was excited to try it out, but I couldn't find a single good review for this game. I mean, the most positive reviews all say something along the lines of, it's okay, but it still sucks. Game Informer stated, it's cheap, as in it sucks harder than an industrial strength Hoover, and releasing this trash is tantamount to slapping someone full across the face and saying, hey, it wasn't my fist, so that makes it better, right? And the official US PlayStation magazine stated, what you have here is your typical mediocre Twisted Metal knockoff, complete with a ho-hum lineup of vehicles, bland weaponry, and uninspired courses. And with scores as low as Electronic Gaming Monthly's 3.17 out of 10 and as high as GameZone's 6.9, I think we're in for a very interesting time. So without further delay, does anyone remember Crush Hour?
Welcome to Crush Hour.
So the story in Crush Hour is something else. Vince McMahon, I guess, buys all the TV networks and injects wrestlers into all kinds of shows, including cooking shows, cartoons, reality TV, and of course, Crush Hour. And that's pretty much it. You're simply a wrestler of your choice, chosen to not wrestle, but instead fight to the death in souped up vehicles across various events. As for the setting, the world's not burning, the world's not gonna burn, and there are no major villains. You're simply participating in said events for no reason other than making money for the corporation. This, in conjunction with the boring plot, make for a paper-thin experience. Where's the hook? They didn't actually expect wrestling fans to love this, did they?
I'm just worried about where we're going from here.
So, you have 2 main game modes on offer here. You have Season, which is the story, and Exhibition, which is a single bout. This is pretty commonplace for this type of game, but where it gets irritating are the map modes. Some are standard, like Raw, Elimination, Battle Royale, or Free-for-All. They're all basically the same mode, only some you have multiple lives, where others you only have one. On the other side of the coin, you have the incredibly irritating modes, such as Hardcore, where your objective is to grab a belt and hold on to it for X amount of time to win. Or how about Running the Gauntlet, where you need to capture a set amount of stars to win. But the most irritating mode is Royal Rumble. There are 2 crowns on the map, you capture one and hold it to avoid elimination. I almost threw my controller across the room during this one. The game doesn't convey your objective well enough. I'd hold on to it, not get eliminated, and then more would spawn, over and over and over. I didn't realize I had to go through the entire roster to win. But all the objective modes are god-awful for one reason. They don't incentivize fighting, which you know is the entire point of these games. Why make a car combat game where your objective isn't taking out the competition? I get that they're emulating the real match types from wrestling, but they don't translate well to this genre of game. They just come across as bloated and busy. Crush Hour has a whopping 32 playable characters, 9 of which are unlockable. I'm just gonna go through them rapid fire because there are way too many to go through in detail. The 23 standard drivers are Big Show, Billy Gunn, Booker T, Brock Lesnar, Bubba Ray Dudley, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Chuck Palumbo, Edge, Jeff Hardy, Kane, Kurt Angle, Matt Hardy, Rikishi, Rob Van Dam, The Rock, Stacy Keibler, Steve Austin, Test, Triple H, Trish Stratus, The Undertaker, and William Regal. You unlock the 9 remaining drivers in the same fashion as Rogue Trip, and that is by beating the game as certain characters. And they are Bradshaw, Christian, Devon, Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Lita, Ric Flair, Stephanie McMahon, and Vince McMahon himself. None of the drivers really stood out to me. As a matter of fact, I found the cars to be very bland. Again, compare these to Rogue Trip or Twisted Metal's selection. Where other car combat games may have considerably less options, they make up for it by having every car and driver stand out amongst the rest for each individual player. You may have loved to play as Axel, while I was loving Hammerhead. You may have tore it up as Ratman, while I preferred Pyro. See what I'm getting at here? It wasn't only about the cars that influenced our choice, but the drivers too. In Crush Hour, I'd imagine you'd pick based off who your favorite wrestler was, not based off special or stats or anything like that. This disconnects you, the player, from the machine you're controlling, and is exacerbated by your choice in character and actions as said character not really having any meaning. No matter who you beat the game with, you always get the same ending. With all that in mind, I chose and finished the game as Kane, and it took me roughly 3 hours. The length wouldn't normally be an issue if the game were interesting, but it's not, so it felt like a real slog. This is made even worse considering you need to beat this game 8 times to unlock all the characters. And while we're on the topic of characters, during the match, they constantly berate your eardrums with absolutely terrible repeating voice lines.
Oh yeah, Hest rules.
That's how a true superstar takes care of business, baby. Just be glad I didn't break you in half.
I'll knock his damn mama out.
Plus, before and after each match, you have all the contestants' intros, and at the end, you have the winner's outro. At first, it's cool, but you have to see them before every single match. That's 17 times in season mode. Now, I do understand that these things are what make wrestling wrestling, but there's just so much pageantry, and it makes for a very repetitive experience. There are a total of 13 maps in Crush Hour, and they're all named after wrestling events. Most of them are lazy, boring, and uninspired. They're arenas, sure, but there isn't anything interesting or unique about them. Remember taking down the plane to open up that sewer section on the Junkyard level in Twisted Metal Black? Or how about going to the moon in Road Trip? Well, there's nothing like that in any of these levels. Even the stage hazards are either so easily avoidable they may as well not even be there in the first place, or they're just generic pitfalls. The maps are Hardcore Arena, Hell in a Cell, Iron Man, Lumberjack, Raw, SmackDown, Running the Gauntlet, Royal Rumble, Bottom Line, Battle Royale, King of the Ring, Cage Match, and Survivor Series. There were 3 levels that I actually enjoyed: Survivor Series, Battle Royale, and Running the Gauntlet. The Survivor Series map has a central open courtyard with side streets jutting out around it. The weapons are mostly found in storefronts, and you have to smash the glass to get to them. Overall, it's not a bad map. The Battle Royale map takes place in a massive busy subway station. The central area has bullet trains constantly zipping through, which are an insta-kill for anyone unfortunate enough to be in their path. But my favorite level is Running the Gauntlet. This level takes place on some rooftops, with jumps, pitfalls, and good sightlines in which to take pot shots at your opponents. It's genuinely a good map. The only downside is the fact that the game just had to shaft the level by making me play a match of Gauntlet on it. It would have been the perfect map for deathmatch or survival. But overall, these 3 genuinely felt like maps you'd see in a game like Twisted Metal. That being said, if there would have been more style or creativity behind them, these maps would have been amazing. But I know what you're asking. How about the weapons? Are they any good? Well, you have the atomic drop, which you'd assume would be powerful, but I wouldn't know. I wasn't able to hit a single shot with it. Then, there's the grenade launcher. This abomination fires bouncy grenades rapid fire, and they only detonate when the game decides they should, so you're most likely going to damage yourself every time you use it. After that, there are the mines. In some car combat games, they appear as a primary weapon, while others offer them in the form of a combo weapon. Either way, they're pretty terrible in Crush Hour. They don't seem to do that much damage and kinda just jostle you around or flip your car. Every time I used them, I'd end up just running over them myself. It reached the point where I'd just avoid picking them up altogether. The next 3 I'm just gonna lump into one category because they're all very similar in use and effect. And they are the laser guided rockets, the Annihilator, and the VRF gun. They're all basically the same weapon. They're just rockets that deal varying amounts of damage. For comparison, they're a lot like the homing, fire, and power rockets from the Twisted Metal series. The Twisty Rocket pickup is the last weapon on offer, and I know this isn't saying much, but it's probably the best one on the list. It looks great when it splits up into multiple projectiles. Said projectiles all home in on enemies very accurately, and when they hit like a freight train. But even though they hit hard, the weapons in this game are just boring. They don't look or feel good when you fire them. Plus, I hope you like your machine gun, because when you do manage to actually find a weapon pickup, you get so few shots and those shots often miss. So it's almost pointless to even grab them in the first place. As a result, combat doesn't really feel fast or high octane. It more or less boils down to you awkwardly bumping into the enemy while blasting away with your machine gun. Furthermore, every time I had a decent arsenal going for myself, it was in a match where the objective was to collect some bullshit stars or something, which infuriated me to no end. As is standard in car combat games, there are various pickups strewn about the levels to assist you. Crush Hour has 6. You got armor, health, turbo, invincibility, double damage, and ramming power. All of them do exactly as their names imply. And as far as pickups go, these are your standard bunch. I mean, it would have been cool to see 1 or 2 unique pickups tailored to the wrestling theme, but at least they got the essentials. In other car combat games, specials came into consideration when choosing a car. For example, Mr. Grimm is very weak, but he typically has one of the strongest specials in the game, so there's a trade-off. In Crush Hour, they're all in instant kills, so strategy doesn't really come into play when picking a driver. Your specials are also on a recharge, but charge faster the more you land hits on opponents, which is a cool idea, but again, there's no strategy in using your special. You just fire them and everything they hit dies. To put it bluntly, the controls in this game are pretty bad. If you've ever played a car combat game, you know that R1 and L1 typically change weapons, or that R2 and L2 shoot either your machine guns or rockets. Well, not in Crush Hour. R1 is your machine gun, R2 is your primary, L2 switches primaries, and L1 is drift. Oh, and the special button is triangle while accelerate is X. So in order to use your special, you have to let off the gas. That's trash game design at its finest. And I mean, I get it, it's not like they had any examples to follow on how this type of game should control or play. So I think we should all just cut them some slack. What?
Yep.
Oh, they did?
Oh, yeah.
How many?
Dozens.
Well, how'd they
I don't know.
Well, how'd they miss the mark so badly?
I don't know, man. This week on WWE Cooking, Kane grills up some delicious foie gras. Now, some people like mesquite, others swear by briquettes. Let's see what Kane prefers. Hey, that's dynamite! Oh, Kane, I don't think that's...
This is probably a good time to mention the commercials. During season mode, you'll have these commercial breaks that feature wrestlers hosting bad shows. The first one is a cooking show featuring Kane. He's asked what he's cooking, only to reveal it as dynamite, subsequently blowing both himself and the cameraman up. Sheesh, is his first name Needles? Then there's Edge in a commercial for hairspray, and for some reason he's surrounded by these silly cartoon characters. The last one has Trish Stratus and Stacy Keibler attempting to start a fire on an island. The cameraman zooms in on their chests and they beat him up. I guess these commercial breaks exist to drive the narrative, or remind you the game even has one, but they're cringy and all they boil down to are lame attempts at being funny. So the final boss fight is against Mr. McMahon himself, and it's pretty underwhelming. The one time you'd want to have a bunch of pageantry, there's none. It plays like every other fight. And there's nothing special or different about Mr. McMahon either. Nothing that makes you think, holy shit, this is the last guy. I bet every single one of us who played Twisted Metal 2 remember our first time fighting Darktooth. The intro text, the second phase, the music, you won't find any of that here. I think if they had given Mr. McMahon some sort of gimmick or something, it would have been a good fight. But he's just another dude in a car. And after you defeat him, the ending shows various wrestlers storming off their respective shows. Now this makes sense, but I'm not exactly sure why they storm off. Maybe I missed it, but there's no mention of the wrestlers themselves showing disdain for the shows they're in. In the beginning, the news anchor lady says that critics continue to protest Mr. McMahon having a monopoly on the networks. Who are the critics? The wrestlers? This just threw me for a loop. It honestly isn't that big of a deal. The funny thing is, I didn't even notice this till I sat down to write this paragraph. So in a nutshell, Crush Hour is a terribly poor attempt at mixing car combat with wrestling, and I gotta say this one is better off forgotten. I know I've spent the last however many minutes trashing this game, but it's not unfounded. See, I can usually find something cool or unique worth praise about a not so good game, but there's nothing here. It's a barren wasteland of muddy textures, bad game design, boring maps, cringy voice lines, and a very deflated setting and plot. Also, until recording for this video, I never realized just how important good boss fights are in these types of games. I try to imagine what a Twisted Metal game would be like without the bosses, and I imagine they would offer an inferior experience. But what about you guys? Do you remember Crush Hour? If so, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll be opening up a hotline with operators standing by 24 hours a day to help each and every one of you get the help you need to work through these tough memories.
Ah, shit! Didn't answer the damn phone. Piss.
All jokes aside, let me know down in the comments what you remember most about Crush Hour. Did anyone actually love this game? I'm genuinely dying to know. But thank you all for watching. I can't accurately describe how awesome the support from everyone has felt lately. I've been like a giddy schoolgirl. So I'd like to thank all of you for watching, subbing, and commenting. And if you have any game recommendations, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll add them to the list. And have yourselves a wonderful day.
What's that smell?
Dookie.